Have you ever explored the world of low code or no code? Let's dig into exactly what these mean and how they can benefit your business.
If you don't have a technical background, here's what I've seen. AI generated code takes you from 0 to 90% really quickly. And it's amazing and it gives you a false sense of confidence. The time you would take you to build something in traditional code versus no code is about 1/5 to 1/10 the time on average. But there are pros and cons to whatever route you go. It's going to be a decision on your part on what cons are you willing to deal with, at what cost, and what gives you the best value for what you're trying to accomplish.
Hello and welcome back. Today's guest is Xan Hong, who's the founder of Drive Phase Consulting. We're going to break down how no code and AI can help founders build faster, scale smarter, and create some real business value without ever writing a single line of code. Welcome, Xan.
Thank you, Chelsey. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I had heard like no code before, but I think I didn't. Well, I know I didn't really know what it was until we talked last. Will you break down what is no code for us?
Sure. How I usually describe it is it's visual programming. And so, you look at traditional code, you're using, characters on a keyboard to write, using a special code of different languages. In the case of no code, you're using kind of pre-built elements, piecing them together to create the outcome that you're looking for. So I like to tell people kind of like maybe what like a WordPress or a Wix did for websites,
Mm.
no code is doing for full-on applications, right?
Oh,
Kind of
that's
drag and drop, but it's not just the visual elements, it's actually the logic behind the visual elements. That's kind of the difference between that and like a WordPress, for instance.
I've made a Wix website, and let me tell you, they're not paying me, but it's very easy.
Yeah. So, you take that and then apply it to a full-on app, and then you can kind of get a sense of, okay, how much quicker. Now compare building a Wix website to coding in HTML to build the website, right? So that's really kind of what we're talking about.
How did you get into this at all?
So always will be one of my favorite stories of all time. But during the pandemic, my daughter, who was about 8 at the time, only child, was really struggling with the pandemic just because she was the only child, really isolated. So her highlight of her day was the ice cream truck. And so being 8, she couldn't go by herself. So what would happen every day is we'd hear the what I will call the creepy ice cream truck music coming around. She would panic like crazy, running around the house, getting her shoes, getting her birthday money, whatever she needed, and then waiting for dad to go with her. And we kept missing the ice cream truck. And so she finally said, Dad, can we build an app to track the ice cream truck? And as a entrepreneurial dad, I'm like, there's no way I'm saying no to this, right? So the first thing I did was look to see, okay, how much would it cost to pay someone to build this?
Mhm.
And I was like, ooh.
Niche.
I love my daughter, but let's not do that. So at the time, Bubble was one of probably the first. It's credited with one of the first no code platforms. I have some thoughts. I actually still call Microsoft Access the first no code platform, but so I'd always wanted to learn that. So what I did instead is spent $700 to take a boot camp on Bubble. I built, over the course of 8 weeks, I actually built the app. And the cool thing is we had a food truck association in Green Bay actually license it from us for about 3 years. And so, this is the idea from an 8-year-old girl. So I started building more and more apps for myself. And then it was like, I started getting people asking, hey, can you do this for me? And that kind of morphed into Drive Phase Consulting.
That's so fun. I'm just like, "Ooh, I think of this idea. I can go make an app for it." How can
I tell people it's like a superpower. If you don't have technical skills, and all of a sudden it's like you can build whatever you want. It's like you just look for crap to build, and it's like, no, let me build this useless app that only I can use, but I can do, I can build it quickly. So yeah, no, it's awesome.
That's really fun. What are some benefits of a company or someone who wants to start a company going the no code route versus traditional coding?
There's a couple, and I will kind of preface this statement with saying that AI generated code has changed the dynamic a little bit, but I still have some strong feelings about the benefits. So, number one, if you compare it to traditional code, the time you would take you to build something in traditional code versus no code is about one fifth to one tenth the time on average, right? And then because the developer is the primary cost in building an app, that means your cost is cost savings is roughly about the same amount, right? And so that's going to be the obvious benefit. But I think there's some more. So it's related, but I think it's also different. So what I've seen where I think no code really shines is okay, you build the initial product. If it's a new idea, what we find 99 times out of 100 is the initial thing you build people use it in a way that you just don't expect them to, right? And so what happens is you put the initial product out there and you get feedback from the market, and then you got to go back and kind of take that feedback, incorporate in the product. So that iteration process, we can do that so incredibly fast in no code, right? Versus, in traditional code, you'd have to go through these 2 week sprints, you'd have to kind of plan everything out and develop, and so that kind of iteration process in no code, I think, is a huge benefit. And again, it's related to kind of the initial benefit. I think the other thing I'll kind of point out as well is there used to be coding used to be such a unique skill set or kind of, just one that took a lot of education to get to. I would also say that the people that were coders were of unique personalities. And so what we found a lot, and we got a lot of feedback from our clients, is like, hey, the team we work with just didn't understand what we were building because they're so far away from the usage of it, right? And so I think that hurt the quality of the product. And so now, where you lower the bar of technical skills, where someone, and to be clear, you still need to have you still need to think like a coder, you just don't need to have those skill sets. But where you now can have users of the product become builders of the product, I think that can lead to better products overall, right? Because they understand the pain points, they understand how it's actually going to be used in a live environment, and I think that's going to lead to a product that's just better suited to the actual use case. So I think those I typically mention are the main benefits of no code.
If you're building a no-code app, say it's just internal use for your company, how's that different from if you're building an app that you want to license to a food truck company or have somebody pay you a subscription to?
In some ways, it's not different. In some ways, it is different. So I mean, I think and I think we've kind of run into this trap. I think there's a tendency that if it's an internal tool to not go through some of the same processes that you would go through, if you're designing kind of like for a consumer or a B2B or a B2C app, right? That's kind of used externally to the organization, right? And so when I'm talking about these types of processes, I'm talking about going through kind of a discovery process where you kind of really think through user flows, user experience, and actually go through the wireframing process to really design out every major screen on that app, right? And I think sometimes if it's an internal tool, there's a tendency to skip over that. And I think we've done that in the past. And I think we've learned not to do that, right? Like even if it's an internal tool, that user process, like really going through that process is really important. Structurally, I would say like the biggest difference is this idea of a single tenant versus a multi-tenant. What I mean by that is, with an internal tool, you're going to design that for one user, right? And so the data structure is much more simplistic, right? Versus if you're designing a tool where each user has to kind of create their own instance of that app, the data structure needs to be a little bit more complicated so that, I log in and I'm not seeing your data when I log in, right? And so yeah, that's probably the biggest difference, but which is not a small difference, just to be clear. But my main point is I think you should still kind of approach that internal tool as if it's an external tool.
As companies are looking at their budget for next year, because we're taping this at the very first day of Q4. So
Yes.
they're looking at their budget and they say, "Holy poop.
Yeah.
I spent $1 million on SaaS tools last year.
Hmm.
What can I cut and bring in-house either with AI or by, building a CRM with a no code or a low code?" how should companies start thinking about bringing SaaS in-house now that it's available?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so we actually, I'm thinking of a particular client in my head of a construction company, 50 users, right? And so with a SaaS solution, he was telling me he's paying 3 grand a month a lot of times for some of these SaaS tools, right?
Mhm,
And so you look at the cost, and so I mean, to replace like a Salesforce, that's not a small thing. So I mean, that could be. So we went through the exercise of, okay, this is what I think it would cost you to rebuild this, right? You're now not having to pay per user, right? You can customize that workflow the exactly way you want. But interestingly enough, because he's been in business for 20, 30 years,
mhm.
the biggest sticking point was, holy crap, I have so much freaking data. Migrating that would be just an absolute cluster. Right. And honestly, I think that's what a lot of these tools are coming on, right? They have so much data in there. So ultimately he didn't go. But I mean, when we did the calculation, it would take about 2 to 3 years to recoup his investment. And then from there, he was saving, 3, 4, 5K a month, times whatever, infinity. Right. So I think that's the kind of the calculation you can go through. What I will say is this as well, though. It is kind of the other consideration that's not kind of a numbers based formula is if you can make your process fit an existing solution, 9 times out of 10, that is the better way to go, right? Because custom software is complicated, right? And so these companies have spent thousands, millions of dollars building that tool that they're using, right? Now, granted, it is in code. And so for us to replicate that is not, I'm not going to lie and say, hey, no go with like magic, we can redo it, right? There's been optimization that's happened. So really the cases where I tell people where custom software does make sense is anytime that you're trying to make your process fit a tool, like that's really one where I'm like, custom probably makes more sense, right? And then the other one is a numbers one, right? Where you're paying 10K a month in software, we could build in 5 months, in the time 50K, we could have that whole thing rebuilt, and then you're not paying, then you're saving that 10K a month, right? So I think there's a couple kind of considerations. And so I think like any good answer, I feel like it just depends. It's just, I don't think you can give kind of a one size fits all answers, but those are the things I would be going through, when I talk to clients about what makes sense in this scenario.
I'm gonna, like, really stick with you for these internal tools for a
Yeah, sure,
second.
sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if say you've got Salesforce and it's in there, it's in your company. It's not going anywhere for at least a decade, but it doesn't do this one thing.
Mhm.
Can you and how could you use no code to supplement the rest of your workflows? Like you said, if something's not there, how could you supplement it with a no code
We've done
solution?
that. We 100% we've actually done that, right? And I gotta be careful not to use technical terms and assume everyone will know with it. So most applications will have what's called an API. So that's application programmatic interface. And so basically that's just a way for other applications to communicate with that software via API. And so it's kind of a universal language. Most kind of off the shelf programs should offer an API because it benefits them, right? Because
Mhm.
an API allows someone to come in and add additional functionality on top of that application, which only adds value to that base functionality, right? That way, that company doesn't have to go and build that out. And so, what we're typically able to do is build on top and build modules on top. We work with Go High Level a lot, and so I integrate a lot of stuff with Go High Level, and so we're able. And actually, Go High Level was built for that, right? Because they even have this custom menu link feature where I can build basically a dashboard and I can add that and it iframes it into their dashboard so they can, the client can access my application right from their dashboard and it's all kind of one experience, right? So 100%. I mean, even for this contractor client, we did an integration using primarily Go High Level and Zapier, right?
Mm.
And so I mean, Zapier is I think is a basic no code tool, but still a no code tool to basically do a bunch of automation that Salesforce, it would have cost an arm and a leg using Salesforce to do. So
Now let's pivot to a founder or someone, a company who either already has customers or someone who's like, I have an idea for a company. How can they use no code for MVP?
There's some people that would argue that you shouldn't use anything else but no code for MVP, right? I mean, there's no difference in how you would approach building that MVP in code or no code. The only difference is that you're typically getting it done faster and less, less expensive. But, and again, I tell people getting to MVP is literally like 1% of the job, right? And so really the job is once you get MVP, get users, well, hopefully you get users, right? And then, you know, pivoting or like kind of iterating from there, that's where no code is really going to shine. But I'll tell you this, and some of the reason why, and there's some exceptions to this rule, but generally speaking, you almost always want to use no code for MVP. And here's why. When you look at why most startups fail, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier is that 99 times out of 100, maybe 101 times out of 100, what you build initially is not the end product that you end up with, right? And
Mhm.
so most startups fail because you need to pivot multiple times before you find the winner, right? And most startups fail because they shoot their load on the MVP and then they don't have enough money to pivot from there, right? And
Yep.
so it's just and so with no code, it just gives you more bites at the apple with the same amount of capital. And I will say this as well is speed to market is a startup's biggest asset, right? Over an incumbent, right? And so if you can get there in 1/5, 1/10 the time and 1/10 the cost, then you've got a huge advantage over kind of other existing kind of enterprise type competitors or just kind of slower moving competitors in the marketplace.
I don't know if you can name names other than the ice cream truck which you built. Is there any other tool that went to market quickly with no code and then was able to pivot quickly and you've worked with them? They maybe aren't doing something they started out to do.
Yeah, I probably can't name names just to be safe, but there's a healthcare company. She just got funded. What I will say, generally speaking, and this is actually kind of a very typical case that I've seen multiple times, right? She built MVP. So actually, her MVP was actually built by another company, and then she actually moved to us. But as she was moving to us, she was going through a pivot herself. So she started in a B2C model, right? She just wasn't getting traction. It's a grind, right? Like you need thousands and thousands of customers in the B2C market, right? And so she made this pivot where she was going to kind of clinics and facility like healthcare facilities. And it was the same base functionality, but the way she pivoted was it was done in a way where these facilities could get reimbursed for using her tech, right? So now you go from I need to go to thousands and thousands of individuals to get 19.99 a month, right? To going to these facilities with hundreds and hundreds of patients that are saying, wait a minute, if I use your product, I'm actually getting paid more. All of a sudden, it's like that conversation got a lot easier and she's getting a lot of traction now. So that was done in no code. And so hopefully this goes back to your question. Sometimes I go down a path, but I think that's an example of, being able to pivot and find that right business model, versus had she been, had that been done in code, that's a tough pivot, right?
Yeah. How does no code stand up to security questions?
Ultimately, it comes down to the developer, but I will say there are some tools on the market. So we started out using Bubble a lot. So when we started out, probably that was 100% of what we were building was in Bubble.io. It's still a great tool. What we found, a couple things. Number one is it didn't scale. So the backend database, in my opinion, didn't scale well. And there's other founders that found the same thing. And they also have kind of a workflow pricing that also didn't scale well. Like like pricing got out of control very quickly, right? And so that you had to design the app to not use this workflow, units. And so, but what I also found, and I didn't realize until I started using another platform, is a lot of the ways I was building in Bubble were horribly insecure, right? And so we started using a stack, WeWeb as a front end tool, Xano as a back end tool. So Xano is built to be enterprise grade back end. And if you're going to be enterprise grade, you have to have, solid security. And so there is a HIPAA compliant version. You have to pay more for it, but there is a HIPAA compliant version of Xano. Bubble, you cannot get the HIPAA unless you get like an enterprise version of it, which is, an obscene amount of money, right? And so really, if you build it correctly, you should be able to have a secure. What happens, and honestly, kind of not to go too deep in the weeds, but just to kind of give you a taste of it, is most of the time the security happens on the front end. So what is showing in your browser? Because if you go in to an application and you right click in Chrome and click inspect, you can see all the API calls that are happening, including API keys, everything. That was an eye opener for me, right? And so what you want to do is have all that happening on your back end so that someone can't see it. So the more you can do that, the more secure your app is. I mean, there's still other things that need to happen, like the database itself and the back end itself needs to be secure. But really, most of the time, the vulnerabilities are happening in that front end because someone built something in a way that maybe you can't do it through the app, but if someone knows what they're doing, they can go into a tool called Postman, recreate those API calls, and use those API keys and actually get access to data that they're not supposed to. So maybe a bunch of technical stuff, but
No, I went down like, whoa. So some of the AI solutions I worked with, I'm putting AI in air quotes.
Okay.
It was an ingestion engine. So we just took a flat PDF or data from somewhere, ran
Okay.
it through something like a Hyperscience or an Abby, and then, oh, look, we sorted it and made it look pretty in your tool. Now, the problem with packaging that and selling it out to the market is we were held hostage by the ingestion tool, this tech that we didn't own, this
Mhm.
Abby or this Hyperscience. That was the real, engine built behind the whole
Sure.
software. Is no code kind of scary like that, where a bubble could just jack up the rates, or have you seen it be more of a steady process over the last few years?
Yeah. So like everything, there's pros and cons, right? So
Mhm.
one of the biggest ones I always hear about no code is this vendor lock is what people will call it, right? So that's essentially, I think, what you're kind of referring to. So what I would say is, I truly believe that any tech stack will have some sort of vendor lock in some way, right? Like some greater than others. So it's a valid concern for sure. So if you look at something like a WeWeb, one of the nice things, so one of the knocks on Bubble is we don't have access to the source code. Now, they've always said if Bubble goes out of business, they'll open source the Bubble backend code, right? And so people have access to it. But if you outgrow Bubble, right, you still kind of then have to do that migration, which is not an easy thing. One of the attractive features of like platforms like WeWeb and Flutterflow is they do output code. So you build it in no code, you do output code. So in WeWeb's case, it's Vue.js. In Flutterflow's case, it's Flutter. I've heard from developers that code is not that usable, but I would also say that if you have another developer build your initial product and then try and give it to another developer, it's not that easy either to go and have it.
I write in Perl only.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Right. Like it's like a lawyer, right? Half the time a lawyer will tell you like, oh, you got another document. It's going to be easier for me to rewrite this document than for me to go and edit it, right? Like it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's very much kind of the same type of thing. With Xano, it does not output code. At Enterprise, you can self-host Xano, so you can have it on your own server. There is a low-code version of Xano called Supabase where you can self-host that as well. So that is kind of one way. One of the attractive features of using Xano backend, WeWeb frontend versus Bubble being full stack, where everything's in Bubble, right, is Xano's designed to be enterprise. You can build a front end in WeWeb, but if you outgrow that in some way, or you want to put a coded front end, you could do that, right? And so you've kind of bifurcated, front and back end, so you're not tied to you've kind of spread that risk out a little bit, right?
Like a hermit
But
crab who gets a bigger shell.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So there's ways to address it. It's definitely a valid concern. I still believe that people don't realize that there's vendor lock kind of no matter which way you go. It just looks different. Does that make sense? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of what I think people don't realize.
So if we go, I hear three different buckets from this conversation. One would be you outsource all your SaaS, and you've got Salesforce, and then HubSpot ties into Salesforce, and then whatever
Yep.
else you use. But
Yep.
you're kind of locked in there, like you said with
Mm-hmm.
your construction
Mm-hmm.
company. They've got you sticky, sticky, sticky. So if
Yep.
you want to switch to another SaaS or build in house, you're locked there somehow, and they can
Yep.
jack their prices, and they
Yep.
do.
Yep.
Then then you've got folks that are like, I'm gonna build everything in house, and you have control, but the maintenance
Oh,
and the
100%. Yep.
speed of innovation is gonna be completely hampered if everything's in house with a human.
Yep.
And then this low codes or no code, I'll put slash,
Yeah. Most people do. Yeah.
can kind of bridge the two where you can move quickly. You don't have to manage it yourself, but you
Yep.
can if you need to. So
Exactly.
you're locked in all three.
I would agree. I think I've made that argument. Not everyone agrees with me. Like usually it's coders that hate no code that will, that will argue with me on that. But, I will always tell people like there are pros and cons to whatever route you go, right?
Mhm.
It's just going to be a decision on your part on which one you're willing to, what cons are you willing to deal with at what cost and what gives you the best kind of value, for what you're trying to accomplish. Right. So that's why I tell people like any consultant that just starts giving you solutions without understanding what you're doing, you should always be wary of because
Yeah.
I truly believe there are rarely like universal answers that are right for everyone. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
Earlier, you touched on AI and how it was like the first sentence we said. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
now with AI, things are changing
Yeah.
a little bit. So, what is AI changing in the no code world?
I would put it in two buckets that I'm seeing. So, and one of them keeps me up at night, specifically for so one is 100% AI generated code, right? And so AI generated code. So you're looking at solutions like Lovable, Replic's another one, even Claude itself, even ChatGPT. You can go in and generate code, right? Here's what I found, and it was kind of confirmed by someone, and I think they'll be coming back to us at some point because I think if you have a technical background where you can code, when I say technical background, I'm talking about someone that can code. AI generated code is like that bionic suit, Iron Man suit that you can put on that just kind of enhances your existing powers, right? And so I think coders that I think they'll find that that AI generated code is going to help them code much much quicker, right? If you don't have a technical background, here's what I've seen. AI generated code takes you from 0 to 90% really quickly, right? And it's amazing and it gives you a false sense of confidence because people don't realize that 90 to 100 is the most important part. Like I tell people all the time, it's like getting that contractor come in, right? They do a great job getting, and then you got that punch list, and then you can't get them to come back and fix it, right? It's like the most painful part that no one wants to do, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think it's still like the example I give is I generated this from a blog post or something I did. I had ChatGPT generate this diagram for me. The first go around, it did an awesome job, right? I'm like, this is awesome. I was like, you know what? The only thing wrong with this is the arrows are pointing the wrong way in the diagram. So I was like, all right, just reverse the direction of the arrows. It could not do it. It was the most painful thing. I ended up just dropping the Canva, doing a background removal, and then just cloning the arrows and then just rotating them myself manually, right? Like it was just, and so I think that I use that example because I think it's a really good example of building an app in those tools is it gets you to this. And because you don't know how to code, it's like you're relying on these prompts to do it, and it's just not getting you to get that fine control. So what I would say is I think it will get better, and at some point, no code might be obsolete because it just built the whole thing in itself. But right now, from what I've seen, if you don't have a technical background, what is actually better for you is AI plus no code, where AI builds everything in no code, but then now you can go into the visual editor and make those small edits yourselves. So that's kind of the first thing. The other thing I started to see, which I think is a huge development, we've started to pivot to do more in this realm, is this idea of an AI agent, where from my standpoint, a lot of the skill set is to build an AI agent is the same as an AI application, but an AI agent is really just building an autonomous AI employee that can do tasks as if it were a human, right? So usually that means connecting it to email, connecting it to a phone system, connecting it to texting system, or having it kind of pull data from an application and then performing actions on it as if you had a human on top of, kind of doing that. And so what I've seen is a lot of no code tools are moving towards really making it much easier to build these AI agents in no code. And I think that's going to be, I see us starting to build more AI agents versus an application. I think the only difference between the two is really kind of that user interface, right? The application is designed for a human to go in, interact with it. And an AI agent, in a lot of ways, is almost designed to operate outside of a human, right? And to do that job, maybe you kind of insert kind of places where a human can provide oversight, but for the most part, you don't build in kind of a UI UX for a human to interact with. It's really kind of operating by itself, and so that's kind of the big trend that we see in the AI no code space.
I think so. When you were explaining the graphic that you needed to then go in Canva, it's like, it would have been faster if I just did it myself at some point, right?
No, it was the most frustrating thing. And I'm like, and I use that example because I think it's equivalent to trying to build that app. It's, oh, this is awesome, because we had a client, so he built something in Lovable. He's like, oh, and ultimately he's, oh, I got it this far, I can just do it myself. In my head, I'm like, because I was like, his mindset was like, I got it this far without you, and we were saying, hey, we need this for the maintenance and the iteration and the bug fixes and the debugging, right? Because it just APIs change over time and you have to fix that, right? And I think he's like, the team decided, hey, we got this far, we're going to just kind of do it in house. Honestly, that's fine, but I think it's just not knowing what you don't know, and just that equivalent of reversing the direction of the arrows in an application is painful, right? And to be clear, like, I'll use Claude, I'll use ChatGPT when I'm building a no code, and they're wrong a lot. And I'll have a whole conversation like, no, that's not right. Look at this screenshot, like, it's not right. And so, and imagine them kind of trying to build with that wrong information, and it's going to lead to errors. And it's just, I give this analogy where, so I'm a golfer, I have this app, it has this attachment to my golf clubs. It knows exactly how far I hit the ball. And so it'll give me, like, on this, here's the wind, here's what club you should use. 9 times out of 10, it's right. But then there's a couple times where I'm like in this horrible grass, or I'm on this crazy, angle. And I'm like, no, you're not accounting for this.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And so I think that's where it's just not there yet, because it just doesn't know. Right. And so I think that's where kind of still having that, going from the self-drive mode to grabbing the steering wheel again, you still need to do it. Like, you still need to have that capability to be able to grab the steering wheel
The human in the loop aspect. And even when we had that AI ingestion agent, we had people scan not every single doc, but make sure. So if
again.
something was broken, we'd find it before a million documents had just been scanned the wrong way.
Yeah. It's scary. No,
Ugh.
it is 100% scary.
So you guys are like Sherpas. Even if somebody goes in Claude and is like, build me an app so that I can send birthday cards, e-cards automatically to
Yeah.
everybody in my contact list, and they get 90% there, having a Sherpa that makes sure, okay, we we want to make sure everyone's names and birthdays aren't available to the whole web. We want to
Yeah.
make sure things are updated,
Yeah. Well, and it's that, and it's like either the API you're integrated with had an update and now stuff is coming over differently,
uh-huh.
or I had one the other day where I built an AI agent, right? And so what happened was my wife was testing it, and she came in on Facebook, it assigned her a contact ID. In the middle of the conversation, she gave her phone number. Her phone number was already in the database under another contact ID. And so in the middle, Go High Level switched her contact ID,
Mm.
which actually broke and I had to figure out why, right? And it's just one of those situations where someone just uses it. There's a situation you didn't account for, right? And now you got to go in and troubleshoot that. And it's that troubleshooting is 60 to 70% of our job is going in trying to diagnose, like, why is it breaking, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well, that's really
so
fun. Did you ever see yourself going down this career path? It seems like it's a ever-changing fun adventure.
You could say that. Yeah. No, I actually enjoy it because that debugging process, it's frustrating and rewarding at the same time, right? Because it's you can't get it, you can't get it, you can't get it, and then you finally get it. It's oh yeah, you got it. So it's problem solving, logical thinking that I do like to do. So
Yeah, and you probably get to see a bunch of different apps.
I do. No. That there's some fun stuff that we get to work on. Yeah.
So if someone's planning next year or even a year and a half out and they are thinking, I want to try no code. What's a first or second? What's some steps they should consider taking?
So most of the time, I would say start outside. It's funny because I'm gonna give advice that I probably won't follow myself, but but I'm gonna tell you what I did. It's kind of like the dad telling my daughter, "Here's what you should do," even though
Uh-huh.
I didn't do it this way. But really, a lot of people. Again, there's no right or wrong answer in this case. What you should do is a lot of audience kind of discovery first, right? Like at the end of the day, if you go to startups, like most of the reason why they fail is they build a product that no one wants, right? And they thought they were solving a problem, or they thought the problem was something like different than what they thought, right? And so they start building, and so and then they build this beautiful product. They spend all this time and money on it, and it's no one wants it, right? And so an ideal way, and I actually mentor an accelerator, and I tell people this, like, really the best way, and it doesn't always work, is like you identify the problem, and then I think Grubhub or something, one of the solutions was almost like this. It kind of started like this, was okay, grocery delivery. So instead of building an app initially, it's like, okay, let's go meet with them. We'll manually take your order. We'll go to the grocery store. We'll shop. And so you go through this process and you really like learn, okay, what does a person like about this? What don't they like about this? Right. And then you start to learn, okay, this could be better. We're going to need this. And so you really learn what you need, what the customer wants, what problems you're actually solving. And more importantly, it's because you're talking to them on a regular basis, right? You're getting that feedback in a conversation like humans do. And so I think going through that type of process before you build anything is probably, kind of best approach. Now, sometimes because I can build so quickly, I could probably get away with building something and then getting feedback from someone that way.
Hmm.
But I think there's arguments that could be made to say, hey, like doing it the old fashioned way first, understanding all the steps you would need to get, because it's not even just like the app, but it's okay, because you did it like manually, oh, okay, well, I need to have a credit card payment to pay for the groceries. I need to get here. And so I need to know how many pounds of apples, like you need to know all these things. And so I think there are benefits to going through that process. Oh, but I would tell you, like, that's really where a lot of people take a shortcut. And again, if you're doing it right, that's probably the more right way to do it. Will
Yeah,
I always
and
do it that way? Probably not. But it is again, I think ultimately, I think that probably is the right way to do it. And I think you can agree that there's a lot of value in doing it that way, right?
yeah, and you mentioned it earlier in this call that even if you're doing it internally, like you're building a widget for your internal team, take the time to understand what they're doing today, what they want to do differently, like really map it out. Don't just say, "Blah, here's your new thing you're going to use."
No, because honestly, like even in no code, like things like how your tables are constructed to change that 6 months from now is a pain, because you use this one field for the first 6 months and now you're using a different field, and now, well, you got to go and take all the users you created for the first 6 months and then manually add and add that new field to them and to make everything, because it'll break, right? Because all those first 6 months users don't have that field, right? So it's just a pain. So the more time you take on the front end to plan, the better outcome, the better the outcome usually.
I have so many more questions I could ask. I know we're almost at time, but thank you for sharing. If anybody listening to this, we'll put your contact information in the description. But if anyone starts a no-code project, let us know and keep us posted so we can follow along too.
No, it's awesome. No, I love it. I mean, I think it's by far the most valuable skill set I've ever kind of learned, for sure.
And it seems like a blast. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll follow along and see what you're building.
Sounds good. No, happy to share, and thanks for having me.